Welcome everyone to the Sundays at 2 program. It is my honor to introduce Alex Nyerges, the director of the Virginia Museum for Fine Arts, coming back to our Sundays at 2 program 10 years later, almost to the day from his first presentation here. And I have to say that in the last 10 years, a whole lot has been going on at the VMFA. So I'm not going to steal Alex's thunder. I have the privilege of having already seen the slideshow, so I know it's a pretty fabulous talk that he's going to give you. But I do want to give you just a highlight of some of the world-class exhibitions that have been gracing our museum. Picasso, Chihuly, the Imperial Treasures from the Forbidden City, Kahindi Wiley, and the Terracotta Army, to name just a few. You have heard a lot about the statue that was developed by Kahindi Wiley, and Alex was the one who was responsible for commissioning that, and it is the most expensive sculpture in our museum's history. So Alex took over as the director of the VMFA in 2006. And he came to us from the Dayton Art Institute, where he'd been the director and CEO since 1992. Prior to his tenure in Ohio, he was the executive director of the Mississippi Museum of Art in Jackson and at the DeLand Museum of Art in Florida. In all, he has over 36 years of experience as art museum director, during which he's won numerous awards. In 2011, the Richmond Metropolitan Convention and Visitors Bureau presented him with the Chairman's Award for several accomplishments, including bringing the Picasso exhibition to VMFA. In 2012, he received the Randolph-Macon College Award for Achievement in the Arts for his significant contributions to Virginia's cultural landscape. And at the 2014 Frame Annual Conference in Dijon, France, and that's the French-American Museum Exchange. I've learned that at lunch. He was presented the rank of Knight in the Order of Arts and Letters for his role in furthering the arts in France and throughout the world. In addition to these awards, the Richmond Times-Dispatch honored Alex as a top 10 person of the year in 2015 for increasing the attendance and accessibility of the museum. In 2017, he was named Style Weekly's Power List for Arts and Culture. And in that same year, the Shaanxi Provincial Cultural Relics Bureau in China named him as Ambassador of Shaanxi Cultural Heritage during an exclusive preview exhibition for the Terracotta Army. And that exhibition attracted more than 200,000 visitors to the VMFA during its run. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Alex Nyerges, the director of the Virginia Museum for Fine Arts.
Thank you, Lucia. Can everybody hear me in the back? You're good? All right, great. And thank you, Gloria. It is almost 10 years to the day since I was last here. And let me tell you how much has changed at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in 10 years, and I'll do that with a number of slides to give you a sense, but I'm just delighted to be back here. And Alice, wherever you are, I love your new building, my gosh. Great, obviously, wonderful improvement for Kilmarnock and the Northern Neck, so congratulations. And it's delightful because I know a lot of you are members, a lot of you I see at the museum. We are Virginia's art museum. We were chartered by the Commonwealth of Virginia, by the General Assembly in 1934. We opened in 1936, just a tiny little building with 50 works of art. And many of those, in fact, about 2/3 of those are still in the collection of the Virginia Museum of Art, so they stood the test of time, despite the fact that more than 50,000 other works We've gone from 50 to 50,000 and growing exponentially almost daily. But we are proud to be an agency of the Commonwealth. We're the state's art museum. But in case you wonder how your tax dollars are being spent, let me tell you up front, of the dollar, every dollar that we have to spend, actually only 21 cents on the dollar comes from the General Assembly. The other 79 cents is all of us. Individuals, corporations, donors from across the country, quite frankly across the world, because we have support across the globe. So for all of you who are members and supporters, thank you very much, because we literally could not do it without you. So let me take you on a tour of what's happened in 10 years, because let me set the stage. 10 years ago, we were under construction. We were building the new Mclaughlin wing that you see up here on the screen. We were late. We were over budget. We were in deep trouble. And we told our construction managers, look, we're going to open on May 1st, 2010, no matter what. And the construction people said, there's no way you're going to do it. And we got a temporary certificate of occupancy, for those of you not in the construction business, that allows you to actually let people in the door. And our folks started cooking meals in a kitchen they hadn't been into till 6 days before the opening. And we had a temporary certificate of occupancy for 2 solid years. That's how unready we were in May of 2010. To give you a sense of the museum, we are now one of the 10 largest comprehensive art museums in America, and that's on the basis of our physical size. It's about 650,000 square feet. I'm gonna make it work. There we go. About 650,000 square feet. We actually have 14 acres. We have 6 buildings. The main building being what you see in the majority of the screen here, with the part here towards me is the Mclaughlin wing that we opened in May of 2010. We're also one of the 10 largest on the basis of budget, on the number of employees. People are always surprised. We have what's called the full-time equivalent. In other words, if we just had full-time employees, about 470 employees. We actually have 700 people on the payroll at the museum. The vast majority of them are state employees, but we have about 40 employees in our foundation. And the foundation is our fundraising arm and the arm that manages our endowments. We also have a large endowment which helps to keep things running, whether it's exhibitions or educational programs. And within that, we actually have an acquisitions endowment that is the 7th largest of any art museum in the United States. So you think about the largest, the Getty, the Met, Chicago, Houston are the top 4, and then we end up as number 7 in Virginia. We're also in the top 10 in terms of attendance, but let me tell you, if you take the per capita of the Richmond region and apply that to our attendance, we're not only number 1 in the entire country, but we're number 1 by a factor of about 2.5-fold. That's how good our attendance. Last year we had an all-time annual attendance, and this is people in the door, 700,000 visitors at the museum. This is the entrance to the Mclaughlin wing, which is our new entrance. And I am proud to say, and I love repeating this 1,000 times over, we are the only art museum in the United States that is open with free general admission and open 365 days a year. And for those of you who's like, oh yeah, my colleagues is like, oh well, yeah, Alex, we're open 365 days too. It's like, are you open Thanksgiving Day? Well, okay, well, we're not open Thanksgiving Day. What about New Year's Day? Well, okay, we're not open that either. What about, and here's the kicker, Christmas Day? Well, no, of course not. Now, as we were having a lovely lunch, I was explaining at lunch when we did this, started 10 years ago. I got hate mail, emails. Our phone was ringing in my office off the hook all day for weeks. People labeling me as the Antichrist. And, of course, the answer was really simple. Not because we're a state agency, but we're an institution for everybody. When we're asked to define who's our audience, it's simply everybody, all 8.3 million Virginians, and anybody lucky enough to either visit or pass through Virginia. Now, a second reason, though, and this helped to calm people down pretty quickly, name a place in Virginia that has more images of Jesus, Mary, the 12 disciples. We literally have thousands of images because they're in every part of the museum. In the Byzantine and medieval galleries, in the Renaissance galleries, in the Baroque galleries, all the way up to the 20th century European galleries. Think about, though, also in African galleries. The Ethiopian galleries have more crosses than most churches ever do. And because of it, would we deny people who want to celebrate the ultimate holy day a place to go? And then, of course, being ecumenical, I have to say that since we've been open, equal numbers of people who celebrate Christmas as a religious holiday and those that don't thank us. Those that do say, well, you know, once I've opened the gifts, what the heck is there to do? And then the rest of everybody's like, well, yeah, you know, Aunt Sally and Uncle Bob are visiting, and I have somewhere to send them. But somebody early on, and I get this once in a while, is like, but what about your employees, Alex? How can you dare make your employees work on Christmas Day? And I apologize for those of you at lunch for hearing this a second time. Last year or the year before, a young lady who works at our visitor services desk, I was going around and saying, thank you. I go around and thank people on Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day and New Year's Day for working. And people volunteer, and we usually don't have to assign other folks. Well, and she said, oh no, Alex, thank you. And I said, oh, okay, why is that? If I wasn't here, I'd have to be at my mother-in-law's for dinner. She and her husband packed up and moved to Texas the next year, and I don't know if there was a relationship between those things or not. But our collection spans the world. We have art from across the globe, 6,000 years of humankind history, and we are, as I mentioned, open every day. During the summer, if you come on Fridays, we spill out into the garden for our weekly Friday party, 52 weeks a year. 52 weeks a year on Thursdays, we are open with live free jazz in the Best Cafe. And now we're open on Wednesday evenings until 9. So 3 nights, we have the best regular hours of any art museum in America. When I was here 10 years ago, we were closed. We were closed for 10 months because of our expansion. Now, prior to being closed, though, we were only open 5 days a week with no evenings at all. So we've gone from 30 hours to more than 60 hours a week. And we're looking to expand that even further because for us, accessibility, inclusivity, and relevance are what guide us on everything we do, whether it's programs, the collection, or for that matter, the hours of operation. Now, as I mentioned, the permanent collection, something more than 50,000 objects today. We just received a collection of 8,000 photographs from the Aaron Siskin Foundation in New York. Aaron Siskin was one of the great photographers of all time, the leader of the abstract expressionist photographers. A foundation had been formed in the 80s by him. He put together the foundation so he could safeguard his work. The foundation directors were looking for a home to permanently house the collection. We were asked to put a proposal together. I mean, this is, and I don't usually talk numbers, but this is a collection of photographs worth something, I think the appraisal was about $86 million, that we are now the permanent guardians of, and we're also going to be providing the annual Siskin Prize in Photography, which is a worldwide prize for contemporary photographers. It is the #1 prize out there for anybody doing serious work in photography. our Fabergé collection. If you haven't seen it lately, we rehoused it after a worldwide tour in new galleries that we tripled the space for. The largest collection of Fabergé outside of Russia. We have 5 of the imperial eggs. You see them all now with their individual cases. When I came back to the museum for a visit about 15 years ago, after the board had said, we'd like to have you come talk to us about directorship, I tried finding the gallery. And I wandered around the museum, I used the map, and I kept thinking, you know, I'm pretty good with maps, and I couldn't find it. And I asked one of the officers, one of the guards, where is it? And she said, it's right there. And I had just walked into this room, which was about the size of the space between here and the window and just the front row to the wall. And it was cases against the wall with one case in the middle, and the worst lighting, the dullest dishwater paint you ever saw. And instead, now if you come back to see Fabergé, it's displayed with the magnificence and the brilliance that the Romanovs would have expected it to be, because these were jewels crafted by Fabergé for the royal family. There were only 50 of these eggs made. Only 33, and now maybe a 34th, are known to exist. We have 5 of them at the museum. And we also have interactive, by the way, everything's on our website. If you want to see a great interactive display and learn more about the Romanovs, about the collection, about the collector from Fredericksburg, Mrs. Pratt, who put the collection together, the majority of it, and gave it to the museum in 1947 when she died. It's all online. We have what's arguably the best collection of English silver in North America, given to us by a New Yorker and her husband. First, they came to the museum in 1985. The director then, Paul Perot, was asked, why don't you have any English silver? This is the first English colony. What's wrong with you? And Paul said, well, you know, we just don't collect any and haven't had any gifts. And these collectors said, well, would you like a loan? And Paul said, absolutely. So Jerry Gans gave his business card to Paul. He put it in his pocket, went home. His wife laundered the shirt, destroyed the card, and he couldn't call Jerry back. And about 10 days later, Jerry, who was perturbed that this art museum director in this, you know, Bywater in Virginia, somewhere between their homes in Palm Beach and New York City, would just not bother calling. Paul told him the story. He said, fine. When he died, his widow, Rita, gave the collection as it was then to the museum. And then she started collecting anew. In fact, her competition, and she was collecting when I arrived at the museum in 2006, her competition included people like the Queen of England. That's when she went to auction, that's who she was bidding against. So we expanded the collection yet again in 2012 when we doubled the size of the galleries, and every one of them is a masterpiece. And as you can see, magnificent examples, and it goes on and on and on. Our collection of French Impressionism is one of the best in the country. Right now, the Paul Mellon collection of art is traveling the world, and October 28th, which is a Wednesday, we're going to have the Fine Arts and Flowers Gala. Are there any people in any of the flower garden clubs that participate in Fine Arts and Flowers here today? Yes, great. Thank you very much. For those of you who have never been to Fine Arts and Flowers, we work with the Garden Clubs of Virginia, and our council, which is 800 members strong, puts together this show where they interpret works of art with flower arrangements. So October 28th is going to be the gala. You want to have fun, eat great food, drink good wine, see fabulous arrangements, and then of course the collection. And we're reinstalling Paul Mellon's collection of French Impressionism in the renovated galleries. And it'll be your opportunity. So Wednesday the 28th of October, and thanks for all of you who are participants in the garden clubs. Our collection also from Mr. Mellon includes the largest collection of sporting art in the world. English, primarily, but also French and American, and that too will all be reinstalled and renovated galleries that some 35 years later needed a little helping hand. We have a stubborn, there we go. Our American collections, with the addition about 3 years ago of the Jim and Fran Mclaughlin collection of American art, now ranks as one of the 4 or 5 best collections of American art in the United States, which of course means one of the best collections in the world. So as you look at the collection, it spans from the 17th century, Gilbert Stuart on the lower right-hand side, 19th century American furniture and paintings in the left-hand side. And then, of course, we now have something like 12 John Singer Sargent paintings in the Mclaughlin galleries, and it goes on for gallery after gallery. Now, we opened May 1st, 2010. What we'd like to say is that we bring the world to Virginia with our special exhibitions and our collection. And with our special exhibitions, we think of it as the engine that drives the train, because so many people come to see exhibitions. And exhibitions have included Picasso, which was in our inaugural year, drew 250,000 visitors. These were 176 treasures from the Musée Picasso in Paris, which was closed, much like our Mellon wing is closed, for renovations. So they put it on a worldwide tour, and only 3 places in the United States had the luck and good fortune of bringing these fabulous works by Picasso, paintings and sculpture alike, drawings and prints. It is amazing. Dale Chihuly, the greatest glass artist, not just alive, but up there with Mr. Tiffany of all time. An unbelievably gorgeous exhibition, and we're already working with Dale and looking down the road about 2024 for the next exhibition of Dale Chihuly's work, because he continues to make great art across the planet. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about our partnerships later, but one of the ways that we bring the world to Virginia is to reach out and create collaborations and partnerships with institutions across the globe. In the case of, now it's wanting to go on its own. In the case of the Forbidden City, the Palace Museum, this mystical place in the middle of Beijing, we put together an enormous exhibition that was curated by our curator of East Asian art, Li Jin, a native of Beijing, but it has been in this country for about 35, almost 40 years. She and I have worked together now for almost 28 years at 2 different institutions. I mean, the most brilliant curator of Chinese art, certainly in this country. Kahindi Wiley. We acquired a work by Kahindi Wiley in 2006 when no one knew who he was. When we were asked to participate in the lending of works to the Brooklyn Museum, we used it as leverage to get the exhibition to come to Virginia. And even when the show came in 2016, most everybody didn't have any idea who Kahindi Wiley was. It wasn't until he was asked to do the portrait of President Obama that he became a rock star in the art world. And not surprisingly, the National Portrait Gallery, which put the 2 Obama portraits out on view, their attendance doubled from 1 million visitors a year to 2 million visitors a year, and virtually all of it attributable to the fact that Kahindi Wiley and the other portrait were on view for people to see. He works in sculpture. Hold on to that thought if you don't know about Kahindi Wiley's sculpture. And then more recently, Emperor Qin, the first emperor in China with the Terracotta Army. And the story is, of course, I'm sure you've all heard, 1974, farmers working in a field in Xi'an, China, in the Shanxi province. And, well, it just doesn't... We'll go back. Okay. Emperor Qin created a mausoleum. Now, imagine an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And imagine a stamp in one corner of that paper. The 8,000 soldiers that were buried in the mausoleum represent the size of that stamp. The mausoleum of Emperor Qin is that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So think about the scale. It's a couple of square miles, only 5% of which has been excavated to date. In fact, in our lifetime, it's hard to know what else that in terms of treasures will be found. We had almost 250,000 visitors for Emperor Qin's army, and I have to tell you, who in the audience has been to Xi'an? Let me just say that if you get to go one place more in life, and you get to choose between, Rome and Paris and, pick some other wonderfully fabulous place, okay? Turn them all down, go to Xi'an, stand on the edge of the pit, pit number 1 for Emperor Qin. I've been there more than a couple of dozen times, probably 3 dozen times, and I can tell you every time it takes the breath out of me, because it is timeless. It's magnificent on a scale beyond anything I could possibly describe. Now, I will say, when we had the exhibition, our designers did such a great job of the design and the lighting that it was almost as good as being there. So don't not go based on that. Napoleon, we worked with the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, one of our great partners, to do this magnificent exhibition. That is not Napoleon on the screen. I think he keeps defaulting to automatic go ahead and ignore me. Howard Dina Pindell. We have a couple of curators who are specialists in African American art, did this huge volume and worked with the Contemporary Art Museum in Chicago to do the first major retrospective on Howard Dina Pindell. Not a household name, but let me tell you, in the next couple of years, and Howard Dina is about 80, it's taken her 60 years to get just part of the recognition that she's due. We just opened Awaken at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, believe it or not, whoops, okay, which was all about the path to enlightenment, Tibetan Buddhism. We had this show in Richmond recently, and as I mentioned, it just opened in San Francisco. Not a bad place to visit. If you missed the show here, I'd encourage you to go see it as well. Absolutely gorgeous, but impactful show. One of the many examples of our curators adding great new scholarship to their respective fields. We have 16 different curators across 9 different departments that work in their respective areas to create exhibitions, scholarship, books, articles, and the like. Another recent example is Cosmologies from the Tree of Life. These are self-taught African-American artists. This is a collection that's based in Atlanta that does essentially buy one, get one free. And they have about 1,800 works of art, and we acquired 36 of these works of contemporary, self-taught African-American artists from the South. And some of them are large scale, but also quilts from Gee's Bend in Alabama, who have become, the quintessential quilters of all time. And then, turning to the current exhibitions, Edward Hopper. Talk about a household name. Now, okay, I'm going to be a little irreverent. Edward Hopper is one of the great painters in America of all time. His attention to light, his attention to color are just absolutely unparalleled. His ability to speak to the business of isolation and loneliness, which, by the way, he would often dispute was not his purpose. I'm not so sure he was ever telling the truth on that. But quite frankly, he wasn't a really great painter, technically speaking, but it's how he was able to use color and light and his compositions to create these amazingly powerful paintings, curated by our head of American art, Dr. Leo Mezzo. He did a magnificent job pulling together some of, in fact, the majority of Edward Hopper's very best paintings that exist. Now, the one painting he's probably best known for, I'm sure you know, Nighthawks, the people gathered around the diner, it's dark. Across the street, unfortunately, from that diner is not a hotel, it's not an apartment hotel, it's not anything that fits into Edward Hopper and the American Hotel, because we have guest houses, but it's amazing how much time he spent, and with Leo doing this great scholarship to be able to talk about him. We also have, though, what they're looking at on the right-hand side is the painting called Western Motel. On the left-hand side is an actual recreation of the painting, 3D, and it's a real hotel room, which we rented out. It sold out within 48 hours, and I have not stayed there, nor will I stay there. My wife will not want to stay there. I spend far too much time at the museum. The last thing I need to do is wake up there as well. But people who have done this have been thrilled. Quite frankly, I'm thinking, night at the museum sounds way too spooky for me. The Hopper show is large. There are about 60 Edward Hopper paintings and watercolors in the exhibition, but then also works that look at the whole business of inns and taverns and hotels and motels across the last 3 or 4 centuries in American art. We just opened last Saturday, working together, the Camoinge Workshop. In 1957, Louis Draper, who is right in the middle in the front, a native Richmonder, native of Virginia, had to leave Virginia because of segregation. He was a photographer. He couldn't get work. He went to New York, and he and a number of others in 1963 created this group called the Camoinge. It's a Kenyan word for literally working together. And it's 180 photographs that look at the first decade of the Camoinge group. And we just had an opening the other day where we brought about 10 of the Camoinge founders down from New York to celebrate the opening of this exhibition. 180 photographs. And it's important from a scholarship standpoint, helping to write the story about African American photographers in New York who are finally getting their due almost 60 years after they founded this group. But I'll tell you, the number one reason to come see this exhibition, it's just absolutely beautiful. The 180 works which were curated by one of our contemporary curators, Sarah Eckhart, she selected the most gorgeous show that you just hang on every single work. It's a powerful exhibition that includes work by Draper on both the left and the right here. And it's all about the world they lived in New York back in the 60s and 70s. And these photographers, by the way, are still very much alive and still working today. But finally getting their due. This exhibition will travel to New York, thankfully. We'll be at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Then it's going to go out to the Getty in Los Angeles, and then finish its national tour at the Cincinnati Art Museum in Ohio. Now, we've got some great exhibitions coming up as well. May 23rd, but who likes ancient Egyptian art and culture? Anybody? Nobody? Wait a minute. Raise your hand if you like ancient Egypt. I want to give you a little exercise to stay awake. I don't want anybody falling asleep. It's that time of day that I'm about to, oh my God, it's past my nap time. But we are working with the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This exhibition has been to St. Louis, been to Minneapolis, been to Los Angeles, and will be coming here after the Hopper show ends. It's 300 works of art, including, and what you see on the screen here, is only part of a sculpture that's 16 feet tall, weighs 8 tons. And this is all from a discovery made barely 20 years ago in the Mediterranean. Because a couple of thousand years ago, these two cities on the edge of Egypt sunk into the sea and were buried by both the water and then silt for some 2,500 years. Untouched by air, untouched by anything else. Until a pilot, in fact, they were first seen by a pilot in the 1930s, right before the war, who saw what looked like foundations through the water. But nothing got done until the early 80s when the exploration started. And so they pulled together this exhibition, which, by the way, will travel back to Egypt. They're opening, finally, the new Egyptian museum out at Giza, which has been in the works for 30 plus years. And the treasures will no longer be there down on the square where, quite frankly, you couldn't see most of the artwork because it was so dusty and so dim in that museum. But they're building a world-class museum out there, and you will see great treasures from under the water. Here's one of the sculptures. You got to love the name of this god. It's Happy. It includes works of traditional, what we think of traditional Egyptian art. But of course, the world was changing in the second millennium and the second millennium BC, because the span of time these cities existed went on for hundreds and hundreds of years. But into what we would think of as the modern era, the Roman era, and with the influence of the Greeks. So you have works of art like what you see here on the left that are just absolutely pristine. I mean, works that have been out in the Egyptian air and sun and sandblasted for the last 3,000 years don't look like they do today the way they were 3,000 years ago. Being buried under the water was a time capsule of unimaginable proportions. Now, in addition to all the things that we do on the campus of the museum, we also are in classrooms in every corner of Virginia every day. What you see here on the screen is called Evans 360. The Letty Pate Evans Whitehead Foundation in Atlanta funded the ability for us to do what we call distance learning. Okay, imagine you're a teacher in Grundy, Virginia. Anybody ever been to Grundy? Okay, it's a long, from here it's 7 hours and a half probably, maybe 8. It's about as far from anywhere in Virginia as you can get. But imagine you're a teacher in Grundy. You're never going to come to see the underwater archaeology from Egypt. You're not going to see the American collection, but we can bring it to you. In fact, we can bring it to you live streaming. So you're the class. I'm the teacher, one of our educators, standing in front of that is actually a projector right below the screen. And we broadcast live interactive streaming into every classroom in Virginia. Our goal is to reach all 1.8 million students in the Commonwealth every year. And this is one of the ways that we're doing it. It's been wildly popular. We've expanded the program all across Virginia. And the best thing is, for those of you who are technology adverse, like me with this remote control, it's easy. All you need is a signal and a screen, and you're done. And we have it. Or we don't. Okay, another. And we were recently here in Lancaster County with the new 21st century version of the Artmobile. In 1953, we put the Artmobile out on the road for the first time. The first mobile art museum in the world. At our high point, we had 4 tractor trailers on the road. Fast forward to a year and 3 months ago, we put the new Artmobile out across Virginia. In the first year, we had expected, we wanted 70,000 as a minimum. 90,000 was our hope and expectation. And we flirted with the idea of, oh gosh, if we could just cross the 100,000 mark. In the first 12 months, we went to every one of the 24 planning districts in Virginia. and 170,000 people walked in the Artmobile and walked out of it. And by the way, we also have an electric lift to provide those with mobility challenges access. It is real artwork. It's also interactive. We have a makerspace where the kids, and that's a large majority of the folks that go through the Artmobile, the kids can then create art. And it also has the screen that ties back to Richmond so they can tour the galleries while they're on the Artmobile. Kahindi Wiley. Who has been to Richmond since December 10th to see the Kahindi Wiley sculpture on the front lawn of the museum? Kahindi Wiley, who I mentioned a moment ago, probably the most famous artist working today on the planet. Name somebody as famous. I have a hard time, and I kind of know what I'm talking about. Kahindi Wiley, we unveiled this sculpture on Times Square in New York, where an estimated 300,000 people a day saw his sculpture called Rumors of War. Fast forward to this, December 10th, and we were unveiling it in Richmond. We had about 4,000 or 5,000 people, despite the rain, and they stuck around, by the way, for 40 or 45 minutes when the tarp, which weighs, by the way, 600 pounds, that cloth covering it, it wouldn't come down. A firefighter had to go up a ladder to cut it down 45 minutes later. And people were standing around in the drizzle, and nobody left. They wouldn't leave until it was unveiled. I'm going to try to unveil it. There we go. So anyways, the sculpture is much in line with what Kahindi Wiley has done throughout his career. He takes famous paintings, say a Dutch 17th century portrait of a gentleman, takes the sitter, the original sitter, out of the picture and puts a young African-American male or female in there. Dignity, respect, pride, and it tells a very different narrative. This, when he came to the exhibition in Richmond in 2016, he encountered Monument Avenue. He encountered the Jeb Stuart Monument and thought, well, I could do something. So what you have is the pose, the horse, the pedestal, everything from what's over on Stuart Circle on Monument Avenue. Except that, as you probably noticed, that's not General Stuart on the horse anymore. It's a young African-American male. He's got fancy sneakers and a hoodie and this really cool coif, which of course was the reason the tarp wouldn't come down, because it's this kind of pointy cornstalk hairdo that's all the rage apparently with young folks, and the tarp got stuck on it. So, but it has created 1.8 billion media impressions around the globe. You can't take the next 2 or 3 things that we've done in our 80-something year history and add them together and get anywhere near the media impressions this has generated all across the world. In the New York Times, NPR, everybody and then some. And it's at the front entrance to the museum. It's helping to rewrite the narrative of who gets memorialized and for whom we create monuments. Now, I mentioned around the world, quite frankly, we're everywhere. In Beijing, in Europe, in the Middle East. And our goal is to bring the world to Virginia, but also to take the Virginia Museum across the planet. So the Palace Museum, we know it better as the Forbidden City. We brought our Fabergé collection there as part of a partnership that we have with the Palace, the National Museum of China, which is the largest art museum in the world. They were doing a renovation and expansion about 10, 12 years ago now. And they sent their architects out to measure all the biggest museums on the planet. They came back to Beijing, and their charge was really simple. Make ours the biggest. The atrium, as you can see, about 95% of all the art museums in the world can fit in the atrium alone, which was part of the expansion. I mean, that's not an optical illusion, folks. That is about 3 football fields long. They're the second best attended art museum in the world because the palace across the street, which gets 16 million visitors, outflanks the 10 million visitors that they get. And our collection of Jean Schlumberger jewelry, Mrs. Paul Mellon, Bunny Mellon, gave to us 146 works of Schlumberger jewelry. He was a Frenchman who worked in New York for his career, and they did an exhibition in terms of design that was off the charts amazing, with technology, with the display, and of course, because they get some 10 million visitors, they had a couple million visitors see our collection of Schlumberger in a relatively short period of time. But then, the exhibition has most recently been in Doha, in Qatar. And for those of you who like architecture, this Jean Nouvel building, which just opened in the fall, this is the National Museum of Qatar. I will tell you this simply. Of all of the examples of built structures, designed, whether they're ancient, 19th century, 18th century, 20th century, I think this is the most beautiful work of architecture I have ever seen with my eyes. And unfortunately, this picture doesn't do it enough justice. It's based off what's called a desert rose, which is a quartz stone that is in and around Qatar. And Nouvel was inspired by it. The galleries, the exterior, I mean, it is, every sightline, every surface is just beyond the description of gorgeous. And we opened this exhibition in October in Doha, and then shortly thereafter, at the Palazzo Zabarella in Padua, we opened a companion exhibition, which is Paul Mellon's French Impressionism collection I mentioned earlier, that's going to come back in October for Fine Arts and Flowers for the Gala. And this is the Palazzo in Padua that is now the home until the end of February, till March 3rd. So if you want a reason to go to northern Italy, and you don't need much, I mean, they've got gnocchi, they've got wine, you know, they've got lots of other museums. Venice doesn't have the floods that it had in the fall, so tragically, but they have this beautiful art museum that is displaying Paul Mellon's French collection of Van Gogh and Monet and Degas and the others. After Padua, it'll go to the Mississippi Museum of Art, and if that rings a bell, it's because my career included 7 wonderful years in Jackson, Mississippi, and then across the state of Mississippi, where it's going to go for its final venue before coming back here, October 28th, to Virginia. Now, and this is part of the new skyline in China. This is Beijing. We're creating partnerships with Nanjing, with Xi'an, with Beijing, with Shanghai. In fact, we're the architects to design a partnership, collaboration of the 20 largest art museums in China and the 20 largest art museums in the United States. And we're creating a collaboration. Our embassy is working on it, the Chinese embassy is working on it, the Chinese Museum Association is a partner, and the American Federation for the Arts in New York, that we're helping to bring our two countries together. I think, as you know, when you watch the things about tariffs and politics, our governments don't do a particularly good job on either side of the Pacific, but we in the art museum world can bring us a little closer together, because quite frankly, by understanding people's culture, and especially their artwork, we realize that the creative side for all of us is something we share in common, and we can be inspired by works whether they come from the Pacific or Africa, from Canada or China. Some of the most magnificent museums on the planet right now are in China. They're building 2 new museums every 3 days. I'm going to repeat that to you just in case you didn't quite catch it. 2 new museums every 3 days. Now, I mentioned we're 650,000 square feet of space right now. We've got another 170,000 square feet we're planning to build and undertake any day now. Okay, the museum I just showed you a moment ago, the Nanjing National Museum, they built a new wing about 7 years ago. 800,000 square feet. And if you think about 800,000 square feet, that's an office building about 30 stories tall, and a big office building at that. Well, that's the Nanjing Museum there. Fabergé I mentioned in Beijing. And then, of course, our collections span the globe. Our Chinese visitors are amazed to see the treasures of Chinese art that are in our galleries. In fact, one of the rarest, the upper right-hand side, a Han Dynasty funerary bench that is one of only 5 in the entire world. Paintings, sculptures, ceramics, gold, furniture. We have this huge collection, by the way, of Wangwali Ming Dynasty furniture. And we only show 2 works of art currently because we don't have the space. So we are planning an expansion that'll help manage that. Our partners on the other side of the Pacific include the Palace Museum on the upper left, the National Museum of China on the right, and then the lower left, if you've never been to the Capitol Museum, it's one of the 10 largest art museums in China, in Beijing, and as you can see from the architecture, an absolutely magnificent building. When we opened Forbidden City in Virginia, Governor Mclaughlin, and then the ambassador to the United States from the People's Republic of China, and then the First Lady of Virginia, and then the head of the National Museum in China. And we bring the world to Virginia. The exhibitions that we have coming in the future years, like Terracotta Army and the like, also include France. We're partners with 16 French museums. There are 16 here in North America, 1 in Canada, and 15 in the United States. And we work on exhibitions and educational programs, conservation programs, and hold an annual conference that vacillates from France one year to America the next. We were just in St. Louis in the fall. We're going to southern France this coming fall, and you can see a list of the institutions there. You know, with our Chinese consortium, with the French, obviously working in Italy, Doha, and other places across the globe. And I'm going to close by going back to saying thank you, first of all, for having me come to your fine town and to this great new library, but then also for all of you who come to visit the museum, for all of you who are members and supporters, because without you, we wouldn't have a reason to exist.